My name is Daniel Cooper. For 15 years, I built what I thought was the perfect life in suburban Boston, specifically in a peaceful neighborhood in Lexington where historic homes lined streets, shaded by century-old maple trees. I'm a software architect for Pinnacle Financial Technologies, where I've spent the last decade developing secure banking systems. The work is demanding but rewarding, both intellectually and financially. I've always been the type to plan ahead, setting up automatic investments, maintaining an impeccable credit score, and building a life that offered both stability and comfort. My colleagues often joke that I can predict market fluctuations better than I can predict the weather, and they're probably right. I find security in order and predictability that I met my wife, Melissa, during our junior year at Boston University. She was studying marketing with a minor in communications while I was buried in computer science textbooks. We were introduced at a mutual friend's apartment during a study group that had devolved into a casual gathering. Melissa caught my attention immediately, not just because of her striking appearance with those magnetic hazel eyes and confident smile, but because of how she commanded the room. While I was reserved, calculating, and meticulous, she was spontaneous, charismatic, and adventurous. Where I planned, she improvised. Where I analyzed, she intuited. She could work a room full of strangers like a maestro conducting an orchestra, making everyone feel special and engaged. After graduation, Melissa quickly climbed the ranks at Anderson and Mitchell, one of Boston's premier PR firms. She started as an assistant account manager and through a combination of talent, charisma, and relentless networking, secured a position as a senior account executive managing some of their most prestigious clients. Her specialty was crisis management and brand rehabilitation, helping companies recover their image after public relations disasters. The irony of this expertise wouldn't become apparent to me until much later. We dated for 3 years before I proposed on a weekend trip to Nantucket. The wedding was everything Melissa wanted, elegant but not ostentatious, held at a historic boutique hotel with 150 guests. Her parents, both professors at Tufts University, beamed with pride. My parents, immigrants who had worked factory jobs to put me through college, seemed almost in disbelief that their son had achieved this slice of the American dream. After the honeymoon in Greece, we settled into married life in a starter condominium in Cambridge. 5 years later, we purchased our dream home in Lexington, a restored colonial with 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, hardwood floors throughout, and yes, that iconic white picket fence enclosing a landscaped yard with a maple tree perfect for a future swing. The house represented everything we had worked for: success, stability, and the promise of a family to fill it someday. Children had been part of our discussion from the beginning. Initially, we agreed to establish our careers first. Then, when we felt financially secure enough, Melissa wanted to wait just 1 more year to complete a major certification. Then, it was an important client campaign. Then a potential promotion. The timeline kept shifting, but I was patient. I understood ambition and the satisfaction of professional accomplishment. I never pressured her, believing that when the time was right, we would both know it. Instead of children, we filled our lives with other forms of fulfillment. We traveled extensively, weekend getaways to coastal Maine where we'd spend mornings hiking along rocky shorelines and evenings sampling local seafood, a 2-week journey through Italy for our 10th anniversary, annual ski trips to Vermont with a close group of friends from college. Our home hosted dinner parties where Melissa would showcase her culinary experiments while I selected wines that complemented each course. We joined a tennis club, attended symphony performances, and volunteered occasionally for literacy programs at the local library. Our social life largely revolved around Melissa's extensive network. She maintained close friendships with a diverse group: former classmates, colleagues, clients who had become friends, neighbors, and members of her book club and yoga studio. I had fewer but deeper friendships, mostly with 2 college roommates who had also remained in Boston and a few colleagues from work. I was comfortable in social gatherings, but never the center of attention. That role belonged to Melissa, and I was content watching her shine. She had a gift for making others feel heard and valued, for finding connections between disparate people, for enlivening any conversation with her wit and insight. Our marriage wasn't perfect. No relationship is. But it was solid, or so I believed. We had our disagreements. usually about schedule conflicts or my tendency toward caution versus her spontaneity. But these were minor frictions in an otherwise smooth partnership. We respected each other's independence while maintaining a deep connection that I never questioned. When stresses arose, we discussed them openly. When celebrations were warranted, we indulged together. We were a team navigating life's complexities. With mutual trust and support at least, that's the story I would have told you with complete conviction until 7 months ago. That's the life I thought I was living. A life built on honesty, respect, and shared goals. A life with a woman who, despite our differences, valued our bond as much as I did. A life where trust wasn't just a concept, but a daily practice that I couldn't have been more wrong. Looking back now, I can identify dozens of warning signs that appeared well before my suspicions fully formed. The human mind is remarkable in its capacity for denial, especially when confronting a reality that threatens to dismantle everything you've built. The first subtle shifts began approximately 11 months ago, though at the time, they were so incremental that I attributed them to work stress, seasonal mood changes, or simply the natural evolution of a long-term relationship. The password changes were the first concrete deviation from our established patterns. Throughout our relationship, Melissa and I had maintained an open-door policy regarding our digital lives, not because either of us was particularly interested in monitoring the other's communications, but because we simply had nothing to hide. I knew her banking password. She knew mine. Her email login was a variation of our anniversary date. My phone PIN was our house number. This transparency wasn't consciously negotiated. It had evolved organically from our comfort with each other. Then, seemingly overnight, this changed. I first noticed when I picked up her phone to order dinner one evening while she was upstairs changing after work. The familiar PIN no longer unlocked her screen. When I mentioned it casually during dinner, she explained that her company had implemented new security protocols requiring employees to change all passwords monthly and to ensure they weren't shared, even with spouses. It seemed reasonable enough. My own company had similar policies, so I accepted this explanation without question. Within weeks, however, I noticed that her laptop also had a new password. Then her social media accounts. Then our shared iPad suddenly had a separate user profile for her that required authentication. Each change was explained away with plausible justifications: corporate security, concerns about data breaches in the news, recommendations from her IT department. The explanations were reasonable in isolation, but collectively they established a new boundary that had never existed between us before. Concurrent with these digital barriers came changes in her physical behavior. Melissa had always been naturally demonstrative, quick to offer a kiss when arriving home, reaching for my hand while watching television, initiating intimacy several times a week. These gestures began to diminish, subtly at first, then more noticeably. Embraces became briefer, kisses less frequent and more perfunctory. Intimacy declined from several times weekly to once a week, then once every 2 weeks, often feeling obligatory rather than passionate. Her phone habits changed dramatically as well. Previously, she would casually leave it on tables or counters as she moved through the house. Now, it remained perpetually on her person. She began taking calls in different rooms, her voice lowered just enough that I couldn't make out the conversation. Text messages were responded to with her body angled away from me. Several times, I entered a room to find her quickly switching screens or ending a call. "Just work," she would say with a dismissive wave and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Work became the universal explanation for other behavioral changes as well. The frequency of late meetings increased from occasional to weekly, then to several times weekly. Entire weekend days were suddenly occupied by emergency client situations or mandatory team-building events. When she was home, she was increasingly distracted, often checking her phone or laptop, claiming she was just making sure everything's on track with the Harrison account, or monitoring a potential PR issue. Her personal appearance underwent subtle but significant transformations. Melissa had always taken pride in her appearance, but now there was a new level of attention to detail. She refreshed her wardrobe with more form-fitting professional attire. Her standard perfume of 5 years was replaced by a more expensive, subtly sensual fragrance. Routine hair appointments became more frequent and included new highlights and styling techniques. Her typical light, natural makeup evolved into something more dramatic and carefully applied, even for ordinary workdays. Perhaps most telling was the shift in how she engaged with me emotionally. Our conversations, once flowing easily from work, anecdotes to personal reflections to planning for the future, became increasingly superficial. She asked fewer questions about my day, my projects, my thoughts. When I shared concerns or sought her input on decisions, her responses were cursory and distracted. Meanwhile, she became hypersensitive to any questions about her activities, interpreting innocent inquiries as interrogations. "Why do you need to know exactly where I was?" she would snap when I simply asked how a work dinner had gone. "Don't you trust me at all?" Arguments erupted over trivial matters, unwashed dishes, scheduling conflicts, tone of voice, with an intensity disproportionate to the issues at hand. In each confrontation, I found myself on the defensive, apologizing for offenses I couldn't quite identify, while the actual source of tension remained unaddressed. Despite these changes, I continued to trust her. 15 years of marriage had built a reservoir of goodwill that couldn't be drained by a few months of unusual behavior. I created explanations. She was under pressure for a promotion. She was approaching 40 and experiencing natural anxieties about aging. She was disappointed about our delayed family plans. She was simply evolving as a person, as we all do throughout life. I reminded myself that relationships aren't static, that they require adaptation and understanding during difficult phases. Then came the financial discrepancies. I've always managed our joint finances, not out of controlling impulse, but because I enjoy optimization and planning. Melissa had full access and input, but was happy to let me handle the details of budgeting and investment. My monthly review of our credit card statements revealed several anomalies. Charges at upscale restaurants on evenings when she was supposedly at informal work gatherings. A weekend charge at the Liberty Hotel when she had told me she was attending a marketing conference in Providence. A significant purchase at a high-end jewelry boutique that never manifested as a gift at home or for any family member. When questioned individually, each charge had an explanation. The restaurant was where her team had decided to move their meeting at the last minute. The hotel charge was a mistaken double booking by the company travel coordinator. The jewelry purchase was a retirement gift for a senior colleague, organized collectively by her department. That I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. But the weight of inconsistencies was becoming impossible to ignore. Something had changed in our marriage, something significant enough to alter patterns established over 15 years of partnership. The question was whether I had the courage to discover exactly what that change entailed. The decision to confirm my suspicions wasn't made lightly or impulsively. For weeks, I battled with myself over the ethics of investigating my own wife, weighing my right to truth against her right to privacy. I questioned my motivations, my observations, and my conclusions repeatedly. Was I being paranoid? Was I manufacturing problems where none existed? Was I projecting insecurities onto innocent circumstances? In the end, what pushed me toward action wasn't just the accumulation of suspicious behavior, but a specific incident that crystallized my concerns. During a rare weekend, when we were both home, Melissa left for a yoga class but forgot her actual yoga mat in the trunk of her car. When I texted her about it, thinking she might want to turn around, she responded that she had already borrowed one from the studio. Later that evening, I noticed that her workout clothes weren't in the hamper, nor did she shower after returning. When I casually mentioned her forgotten yoga mat, she launched into a detailed description of the class, the challenging poses, and how much she had sweated. Details designed to establish a narrative that I now recognized as carefully constructed. That night, after she had gone to sleep, I made the decision I had been avoiding. I installed monitoring software on our shared laptop, a computer that was officially ours, but had become primarily hers over the past year as I increasingly used my work laptop at home. The software would capture emails, messages, browsing history, and document access that I told myself I would check it once, and, if nothing appeared, would delete it immediately and seek marriage counseling for my trust issues. I promised myself I wouldn't become consumed by surveillance or allow suspicion to dictate our relationship. I just needed to know, once and for all, whether my instincts were justified or whether I was indeed creating problems from my own insecurities. For a week, I maintained normal behavior while the software quietly operated in the background. I focused on being present, giving Melissa the benefit of every doubt, even initiating a special dinner to reconnect. She seemed to appreciate the gesture, though her attention remained divided throughout the evening, her phone vibrating repeatedly, with what she described as persistent client emails. On day 7, while Melissa was attending what she described as a women in marketing panel discussion downtown, I finally reviewed what the monitoring software had captured. Nothing could have prepared me for what I found. The evidence was voluminous and unambiguous. Hundreds of emails and instant messages exchanged between Melissa and James Harrington, executive director of client relations at her firm, her direct supervisor. The communications dated back 9 months, beginning with flirtatious professional exchanges that rapidly escalated into explicit sexual content, romantic declarations, and detailed accounts of their physical encounters. The messages revealed a relationship far beyond a casual affair or physical indiscretion. They had established emotional intimacy, sharing personal reflections, family histories, and future aspirations. They exchanged morning messages and goodnight texts. They had inside jokes and pet names for each other. They critiqued movies they watched separately while thinking of each other. They planned weekend escapes disguised as professional obligations. Most devastating were the discussions about me. I discovered how they mocked my trusting nature, my predictable routines, my contentment with our suburban lifestyle. James described me as the perfect patsy, and so oblivious it's almost too easy. Melissa responded that I was sweet but suffocating, and that she felt intellectually stifled in our marriage. They joked about how I accepted her flimsy excuses without question, how I never challenged her changing stories. He's so desperate to believe everything's fine that he'll rationalize anything, she wrote. Last week I came home with another man's cologne on my blouse, and he convinced himself it was from hugging Jen's husband goodbye at their dinner party. A dinner party I didn't even attend. I had no memory of this incident, which suggested either selective memory on my part or, more likely, that she was embellishing for James's amusement, casting me as an even greater fool than I actually was. Either possibility was humiliating, but what transformed my heartbreak into resolute anger were the emails outlining their strategy for Melissa's eventual divorce. This wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated conspiracy to systematically dismantle my life while maximizing her financial gain. The emails detailed plans to gradually transfer funds from our joint accounts to her private account through fabricated professional development expenses. They discussed how she could document instances of emotional control and verbal aggression that never occurred, creating a false narrative of an abusive relationship. They planned to manipulate mutual friends by gradually introducing subtle concerns about my mental stability. James, with his extensive PR background, was literally helping her craft a campaign to destroy my reputation and financial security. We need to establish a pattern, one of his emails advised. Start keeping a journal of incidents. They don't need to be major, just moments where he raises his voice, questions your decisions, or makes you feel belittled. Courts respond to patterns, not isolated events. Melissa's reply was chilling. Already started. I'm also recording some of our conversations when he doesn't know. No major fights yet, but I can probably provoke something usable within the next month or two. They had even research judges in our district, analyzing which ones statistically favored women in divorce proceedings and discussing how to request specific judges. They had identified which of our mutual friends might serve as character witnesses against me. They had a timeline planned, with their projected relationship announcement scheduled 3 months after finalizing her divorce. Daniel's so trusting, she wrote in an email that would ultimately seal her fate. He'll never see it coming until it's too late. By the time he realizes what's happening, I'll have everything documented, funds secured, and a support network. Convinced that I'm finally escaping a controlling relationship. He'll be portrayed as the desperate, unstable ex who couldn't handle the divorce with dignity. As I sat alone in my home office, surrounded by the digital evidence of this betrayal, I experienced something beyond heartbreak or anger. I felt a fundamental shift in my understanding of not just my marriage, but human nature itself. The woman who had slept beside me for 15 years, who had stood before friends and family vowing lifelong fidelity and support, who had built a life intertwined with mine in thousands of daily moments of trust. This woman was methodically planning my destruction for her personal gain. The pain was physical, a crushing pressure in my chest, a simultaneous burning and freezing sensation throughout my body. I remember struggling to breathe, leaning forward in my chair, forcing air into lungs that seemed suddenly incapable of their basic function. For several minutes, I couldn't move, couldn't think beyond the roaring in my ears and the nauseating realization that my entire reality had been a carefully maintained illusion. Then, gradually, something unexpected emerged from the chaos of emotion: clarity. A cold, analytical focus descended over me, quieting the pain and outrage. If they wanted to play this game, a game of strategy, manipulation, and calculated moves, they had severely underestimated their opponent. They thought I was a predictable, guileless pawn easily sacrificed in their pursuit of happiness. They were about to discover how profoundly wrong that assessment was. That night, as Melissa texted that the panel discussion was running late and she would be grabbing dinner with the other speakers, I began methodically planning a counter-strategy that would ultimately dismantle everything they had built and hoped to build, professionally, socially, and personally. They had declared war without realizing I had already intercepted their battle plans. Now I would use those plans against them with precision and patience they never anticipated. The next morning, I woke before Melissa and prepared her favorite breakfast: blueberry pancakes with real maple syrup, crispy bacon, and freshly squeezed orange juice. When she entered the kitchen, I greeted her with a warm smile and a gentle kiss on her forehead. If she noticed the coldness behind my eyes or the mechanical precision of my movements, she gave no indication. She expressed surprise and gratitude for the unexpected gesture, mentioning how thoughtful I was, all while her phone continuously received message notifications that she checked with poorly concealed urgency. "Busy day ahead?" I asked innocently, sliding a perfectly browned pancake onto her plate. "The Harrison account is having some issues," she replied, the lie flowing effortlessly from her lips. "Nothing major, just some media management we need to stay on top of." I nodded sympathetically while mentally noting that the Harrison account didn't exist, at least not among the clients she had mentioned over the past several years. Another fabrication, another thread in the tapestry of deception she had woven around our life. That moment marked the beginning of my 2-month performance as the ideal, unsuspecting husband. I became attentive without being smothering, supportive without being intrusive. I prepared dinners, suggested weekend activities while easily accepting her frequent rain checks, and never once questioned her increasingly transparent excuses. Each morning, I kissed her goodbye with genuine warmth. Each evening, I welcomed her home with sincere interest in her day. I became the perfect foil for her deception, allowing her to believe that her strategy was working flawlessly. Meanwhile, beneath this performance of marital contentment, I executed a meticulously structured plan with 3 primary objectives: financial protection, evidence collection, and strategic positioning for the inevitable confrontation that my first action was securing my personal financial future. Within 48 hours of discovering the affair, I consulted with Martin Caldwell, reportedly the most aggressive divorce attorney in Boston. His reputation for ruthless efficiency and comprehensive case preparation made him precisely the advocate I needed. During our initial 4-hour consultation, I shared selected evidence of Melissa's infidelity and their conspiracy to fabricate abuse claims against me. Caldwell's response was immediate and tactical. "Document everything," he advised, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had navigated these treacherous waters countless times. "Keep records of all normal interactions. If you have smart home devices with recording capabilities, make sure they're activated in common areas. Massachusetts is a 2-party consent state for audio recordings, so we can't record private conversations without her knowledge, but we can document patterns of normal behavior that contradict her." Plan narrative. With Caldwell's guidance, I implemented a comprehensive financial protection strategy. I opened individual accounts at a different banking institution and gradually moved 50% of our joint savings into these accounts, an amount legally justifiable as my portion of marital assets. I documented all transfers meticulously, ensuring nothing could be construed as hiding assets. I changed the beneficiaries on my life insurance and retirement accounts from Melissa to my parents temporarily, a standard protective measure in pre-divorce proceedings that I conducted a complete inventory of our home, photographing valuable items with documentation of purchase dates and values. I secured important personal documents, birth certificate, passport, financial records, family heirlooms, in a safe deposit box accessible only to me. I frozen our joint credit accounts to prevent additional charges while maintaining my individual accounts for personal expenses. Simultaneously, I escalated my evidence-gathering operation. The initial monitoring software had provided damning evidence, but I needed comprehensive documentation of the affair's timeline, their future plans, and most importantly, their conspiracy to fabricate abuse claims against me. I upgraded to more sophisticated tracking tools that captured screenshots, keystrokes, and web activities. I backed up all evidence across multiple secure platforms, ensuring that no technical glitch or discovered surveillance could erase the truth. I hired Carson Investigations, a private investigation firm specializing in infidelity cases, to conduct physical surveillance. Their team documented multiple rendezvous between Melissa and James at hotels, restaurants, and most damaging, at a luxury condominium they had been touring together, apparent preparation for their post-divorce life. The investigators provided photographic evidence, time-stamped video, and detailed reports of their activities, creating an irrefutable timeline of their relationship. Through methodical research into James Harrington, I uncovered vulnerabilities that would prove crucial in the coming confrontation. James wasn't just Melissa's boss and lover. He had carefully cultivated a public persona as a family-centered community leader. He served on the board of directors for the Children's Community Foundation, the Ethics Committee of the Regional Business Council, and as treasurer for his church's Family Ministries program. His professional biography prominently featured his 20-year marriage to Catherine, a respected pediatric oncologist at Boston Children's Hospital, and their 3 teenage children. His social media accounts were filled with family vacation photos, attendance at his children's sporting events, and anniversary celebrations with Catherine. The contrast between this public image and his private actions created a devastating potential for exposure. The man who spoke at ethics conferences and wrote occasional columns on integrity-centered leadership for business publications was engaging in workplace sexual impropriety with a direct report while simultaneously conspiring to falsify evidence for a divorce proceeding. This hypocrisy would prove to be his professional Achilles heel. That I also investigated the couple's digital security practices and discovered that James regularly used Melissa's laptop when they met, logging into his personal and work accounts. This carelessness provided me access to his professional correspondence, including internal company communications about upcoming leadership changes, client retention strategies, and most significantly, his mentorship of younger female employees. Context that would later cast his relationship with Melissa in an even more professionally problematic light. As the evidence accumulated, I consulted with additional legal experts specializing in workplace harassment and defamation law. These consultations weren't for immediate action, but to understand the full spectrum of legal vulnerabilities that both Melissa and James faced. I wanted to know exactly which pressure points would be most effective when the time came. The most difficult decision in my preparation phase involved Catherine Harrington, James's wife. My initial instinct was to contact her immediately. She deserved to know the truth about her marriage. However, strategic timing would be crucial for maximum impact. Consulting with both my attorney and a family therapist who specialized in infidelity trauma, I developed a plan for approaching Catherine that would respect her dignity while serving the broader strategy. Throughout this intensive preparation period, I maintained a detailed journal documenting my daily activities, conversations with Melissa, and my emotional state. This journal served dual purposes: therapeutic processing of my ongoing trauma and creation of contemporaneous records that could later refute any false claims about my behavior or mental state during this period. The final component of my preparation involved cultivating a support network without revealing the specific circumstances. I reconnected with old friends, strengthened relationships with family members, and even joined a boxing gym to channel my anger productively while improving my physical health. These connections would prove invaluable in the aftermath that was To come to be by the end of the 2-month preparation period, I had assembled a comprehensive arsenal of evidence, legal strategies, financial safeguards, and emotional resources. Melissa and James remained entirely unaware of my knowledge or preparations, continuing their affair with increasing boldness as they approached their planned confrontation timeline. The stage was set for a reckoning they never anticipated. They believed themselves to be master strategists executing a flawless plan against an oblivious opponent. In reality, they were walking blindfolded into a counteroffensive designed with precision to dismantle everything they valued. They had planned my destruction without considering that perhaps I might be equally capable of calculated strategy. Their fundamental miscalculation was about to become evident. The implementation of the social destruction phase required perfect timing and precise execution. After consultation with my attorney and the private investigators, I identified an optimal window that would maximize impact across professional, social, and personal domains simultaneously. This window coincided with two significant events: the annual Industry Awards Gala, where Melissa's firm was nominated for excellence in crisis management, and the fundraising gala for the Children's Community Foundation, where James was scheduled to give the keynote address as board director. The operation began on a Monday morning at exactly 9:15 a.m., when most executives would be settling into their workday following staff meetings. Using an anonymous email service routed through multiple VPNs, I sent a comprehensive dossier to every member of the Anderson and Mitchell Executive Leadership Team, Board of Directors, and Human Resources Department. The email's subject line was deliberately understated: confidential, professional ethics concern requiring immediate attention. The contents were meticulously organized for maximum professional impact. The opening paragraph established a formal, business-appropriate tone, expressing reluctance to bring this matter forward, but citing the firm's own published ethics guidelines regarding workplace relationships and conflicts of interest. What followed was a carefully curated selection of evidence documenting the affair between James Harrington, executive director, and his direct report, Melissa Cooper. The evidence was presented chronologically, beginning with early flirtatious emails that crossed professional boundaries, progressing to explicit communications sent during work hours on company devices, and culminating in documentation of company resources used to facilitate their relationship. This included expense reports for client meetings that were actually romantic dinners, hotel charges for business trips where they shared accommodations, and company vehicle usage logs showing trips to their rendezvous locations that I intentionally excluded the most sexually explicit content, focusing instead on the professional ethical violations, abuse of power dynamics, misuse of company resources, and potential liability issues created by their relationship. I included screenshots of James counseling Melissa on her performance review, a clear conflict of interest, and emails discussing how her upcoming promotion would be perceived once their relationship eventually became public, the dossier concluded, with a section titled Potential Liability Considerations, outlining how this situation could expose the firm to hostile workplace claims from other employees, damage client relationships if the impropriety became public, and potentially violate the ethics clauses in several major client contracts. This framing transformed their personal indiscretion into a significant business risk requiring immediate action. That by 10:30 a.m. that same morning, both Melissa and James were called into separate emergency meetings. By noon, security was escorting them both from the building, their company devices confiscated, and their access credentials deactivated. They were placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation, effectively neutralizing their professional standing and income security in a single morning. Melissa called me in panic shortly after being escorted out, claiming there had been a misunderstanding at work and that she was coming home early. I expressed appropriate concern and support, asking minimal questions while preparing a comforting dinner as if nothing were amiss. Her visible anxiety and attempts to manage the crisis through frantic phone calls provided an almost theatrical confirmation of the email's effectiveness. Phase 2 of the social destruction strategy targeted James's carefully constructed community standing. The timing was calibrated for Wednesday morning, allowing the professional crisis to fully develop while creating fresh chaos immediately before the weekend's charity events. Similar dossiers, appropriately tailored with emphasis on moral hypocrisy, rather than workplace impropriety, were delivered to each organization where James held leadership positions, the Children's Community Foundation board members. The emphasis was on James's betrayal of family values and the potential public relations damage to an organization focused on child welfare. To his church leadership council, the focus was on the biblical principles he publicly espoused while privately violating. To the Regional Business Council's Ethics Committee, the emphasis was on the fundamental contradiction between his published statements on integrity and his documented deception. Each communication was constructed with sophisticated understanding of the specific organization's values and concerns. Each included only the necessary evidence to establish the facts without salacious detail. Each emphasized the vulnerability of the organization's reputation should they continue their association with someone whose private behavior so dramatically contradicted their stated principles. The response was swift and comprehensive. By Friday afternoon, James had been asked to temporarily step back from all his community positions pending internal reviews. His keynote address at Saturday's gala was reassigned to another board member. His church leadership role was suspended for a period of spiritual reflection and family healing. The professional reputation he had spent decades building was systematically dismantled in less than 5 days. Throughout this period, I maintained a careful distance from the unfolding chaos. I never identified myself as the source of the information. I never engaged directly with any of the organizations or individuals involved. I simply provided truth and allowed natural consequences to unfold. The most delicate aspect of this phase involved Catherine Harrington, James's wife. After considerable ethical reflection, I decided she deserved to know the truth from a place of compassion rather than as collateral damage in my broader strategy. On Thursday evening, while Melissa was meeting with an attorney to discuss her workplace situation, unaware that I knew the real purpose of this meeting, I sent Catherine a private email. The communication was respectful and restrained, acknowledging the pain this information would cause while emphasizing that she deserved to know the truth. I provided only the essential evidence needed to establish the reality of the affair, excluding the more hurtful details about how they discussed their respective spouses. I included my personal contact information should she wish to verify anything or ask questions, while making clear that I would respect her privacy regardless of how she chose to proceed. Catherine's response came 24 hours later, a brief acknowledgement and thank you for my difficult but necessary honesty. She asked several specific questions to confirm the timeline and requested certain additional evidence, which I provided with appropriate context. Our communication remained dignified and focused on establishing truth rather than inflaming emotions. The social destruction phase reached its crescendo during the weekend when both Melissa and James would have been prominently featured at their respective professional and community events. Instead, their conspicuous absence sparked intense speculation and gossip. When mutual friends inquired about Melissa's absence from the industry gala, I responded with carefully practiced confusion and concern. She mentioned some workplace complications, but hasn't shared the details. I'm giving her space to handle it professionally. I'm as surprised by her absence tonight as you are. This deliberate portrayal of myself as the supportive, somewhat bewildered husband further contradicted the narrative they had planned to construct about our marriage. In every social interaction during this period, I was calm, concerned, and completely reasonable, establishing a public persona diametrically opposed to the controlling, unstable character they had conspired to create. By the following Monday, their social and professional worlds had imploded completely. The workplace investigation had accelerated based on additional evidence provided by colleagues once the initial revelations created a permission structure for others to come forward. Reports emerged of other inappropriate interactions James had engaged in with junior staff, suggesting a pattern rather than an isolated relationship with Melissa. Their community standing evaporated as former friends and colleagues distanced themselves from the scandal. Invitations were rescinded. Social media connections were quietly severed. The whisper network that operates in any professional community ensured that the essential facts spread rapidly, even among those who hadn't received the original evidence. Perhaps most devastating for them personally was the destruction of their planned future together. With both under workplace investigation, their professional credibility shattered, and their reputations in tatters, the foundation of their relationship began crumbling under the pressure. Their communications, which I could still monitor through the surveillance software, shifted from romantic planning to crisis management, from future dreams to damage control strategies. Throughout this phase, I maintained my performance as the supportive husband, expressing appropriate concern for Melissa's situation while never revealing my knowledge or involvement. I prepared her favorite meals, offered emotional support, and provided a stable presence as her world collapsed around her. This performance served multiple strategic purposes. It prevented premature confrontation before all elements of my plan were in place. It established a clear pattern of supportive behavior that contradicted her planned narrative, and psychologically, it denied her the ability to cast me as the villain in this unfolding drama. The social destruction phase accomplished everything I had intended. Their professional standing was compromised. Their community positions were lost. Their reputations were damaged. Their relationship was strained under pressure. And most importantly, their strategic position for the coming legal battle was fatally weakened before they even realized that battle had begun. 3 weeks into the social and professional devastation, while Melissa was still desperately attempting to salvage her career and James was facing the implosion of his marriage, I executed the final phase of my strategy. On a Tuesday morning, while Melissa was meeting with her attorney to discuss her employment situation, my lawyer filed divorce papers citing adultery, conspiracy to defraud, and emotional distress. The timing was deliberately chosen to create maximum disorientation. With Melissa already in crisis management mode regarding her professional standing, this new legal front forced her to divide her attention and resources at the moment when she was most vulnerable. The specific citations in the filing were designed to signal that we possessed substantial evidence, preemptively countering any false narrative she might attempt to construct. When Melissa returned home that afternoon, she was served with the divorce papers by a professional process server I had arranged to be waiting. I had deliberately chosen to be absent during this moment, both to avoid any potential confrontation and to deny her the opportunity to immediately shift into manipulation mode. The process server later reported that Melissa's reaction progressed from confusion to shock to visible panic as she scanned the documents and realized the comprehensive nature of the filing. By the time I returned home that evening, she had transformed from panic to calculated composure, greeting me with a practiced expression of wounded innocence. "Daniel, there's been a terrible misunderstanding," she began, her voice quavering, with what I now recognized as performative vulnerability. "I can explain everything in those papers. It's not what it looks like." I responded with a calm detachment that clearly unsettled her. "I think we both know exactly what it is, Melissa. I've known for months. Every email, every text, every hotel meeting, every plan you made with James to fabricate abuse claims against me. I have it all documented. We should let our attorneys handle the communication from this point forward." The color drained from her face as she realized the extent of my knowledge and preparation. Her initial attempt to deny everything quickly transformed into a desperate offer of couples counseling, followed by tearful admissions of making a mistake while insisting that James had manipulated her. When these approaches failed to elicit the emotional response she expected, she shifted to anger, accusing me of spying on her and invading her privacy, ironic considering her own documented plans. "I'll be staying at my brother's apartment until this is resolved," I informed her, already having arranged this accommodation weeks earlier. "My attorney will contact yours regarding the house and any necessary communications." This controlled departure denied her the opportunity for further manipulation while establishing a clear record of my reasonable behavior. It also ensured that she couldn't fabricate any incidents during our separation, as I would have witnesses to my whereabouts and conduct at all times. That my attorney, Martin Caldwell, had prepared comprehensive documentation supporting each claim in our filing. The adultery charges were substantiated with time-stamped photographs, hotel receipts, and electronic communications. The conspiracy to defraud allegations were supported by the extensive documentation of their plans to fabricate abuse claims and inappropriately transfer marital assets. The emotional distress claims were validated by therapist reports documenting my psychological state upon discovering both the infidelity and the planned character assassination. Simultaneously, Catherine Harrington filed for divorce from James, creating a powerful legal pincer movement. Though we never coordinated our legal strategies directly, our respective attorneys maintained professional awareness of both cases, creating complementary pressure on both Melissa and James. This dual-track approach prevented them from consolidating resources or developing a unified defense strategy. The legal process unfolded with methodical precision over the following months. Melissa's initial legal response attempted to portray herself as a victim of workplace power dynamics, claiming James had pressured her into the relationship and that any discussions of divorce strategies were theoretical venting rather than actual planning. This narrative collapsed under the weight of evidence showing her as an enthusiastic and equal participant in both the affair and the conspiracy. Her subsequent attempt to counterclaim emotional neglect was similarly unsuccessful. My documented pattern of supportive behavior throughout our marriage, extensive evidence of continued attentiveness even during her affair, and witness statements from friends and family regarding my consistent character directly contradicted her portrayal. The journal I had maintained during the discovery and planning phases proved particularly valuable in establishing my mental and emotional state during this period. The most critical legal victory came during the discovery phase when my attorney successfully argued for access to Melissa's personal communications based on the evidence we had already presented. This legal maneuver revealed additional damaging information. She had consulted with 3 different attorneys over the previous year, shopping for one who would support her planned strategy. She had established a private bank account to which she had diverted approximately $47,000 from our joint assets through fabricated personal expenses. And she had privately listed our vacation property with a realtor, exploring options to sell it before filing for divorce. At each step of the legal process, we maintained an overwhelming evidentiary advantage. While Melissa's attorney attempted to characterize our evidence as selectively edited or taken out of context, we simply produced more comprehensive documentation, including full conversation threads that actually revealed even more damning exchanges than our initial filings had referenced. Perhaps most devastating to her case was the testimony of James Harrington, who, facing his own divorce proceedings and professional ruin, ultimately prioritized damage control over loyalty to Melissa. During his deposition, when confronted with evidence of their conspiracy to fabricate abuse claims, he distanced himself from the strategy, claiming it was primarily Melissa's idea, that he had inappropriately humored without believing she would actually pursue it. This betrayal completed the collapse of their united front, leaving Melissa isolated in her increasingly untenable position. 4 months into the proceedings, Melissa's attorney approached mine with a settlement offer, recognizing that their position was deteriorating with each new revelation. The initial proposal was insultingly inadequate. She would drop all claims in exchange for 50% of our assets and temporary alimony. My counteroffer was unambiguous. I would accept only a settlement that acknowledged her documented misconduct and appropriately reflected the legal reality of our situation. The negotiations continued for several weeks, with her position weakening as the trial date approached. The final settlement, which the judge approved with visible satisfaction, awarded me full ownership of our primary residence, 75% of our investment portfolios, and complete restoration of the funds she had diverted to her private account. She retained her personal property, her vehicle, and 25% of our liquid assets, significantly less than she would have received in a no-fault divorce, but more than she likely would have been awarded had we proceeded to trial given the evidence against her. Most importantly, the settlement included a non-disparagement clause preventing her from making false claims about the marriage or divorce in the future, with substantial financial penalties for violations. This provision protected me from any subsequent attempts to resurrect her fabricated narrative of abuse or control. Throughout the legal proceedings, I maintained dignified composure, never engaging in personal attacks or vindictive behavior despite ample provocation. This restraint impressed the judge and further undermined Melissa's attempts to portray me as unstable or aggressive. By focusing exclusively on documented facts and legal arguments rather than emotional grievances, we established a compelling contrast between my evidence-based approach and her increasingly desperate attempts to salvage her position. The judge's final comments during the settlement approval hearing were particularly validating. The court is satisfied that this agreement, while severe, appropriately reflects the exceptional circumstances of this case, he noted. Matrimonial fraud is a serious matter that undermines the fundamental trust upon which our family law system depends. The documentation provided in this case has been unusually comprehensive and troubling. As Melissa left the courtroom beside her visibly disappointed attorney, I experienced not triumph or joy, but a profound sense of justice served. This wasn't about revenge, but accountability, ensuring that calculated deception and betrayal didn't yield the rewards they had so methodically planned. The legal victory extended beyond the divorce settlement itself. The documentation from our proceedings became relevant in Melissa's employment arbitration, ultimately resulting in termination for cause rather than the severance package she had been negotiating. Similarly, evidence from both our case and Catherine's divorce proceedings contributed to James's permanent removal from his executive position following the completion of the firm's internal investigation. While the financial and property aspects of the settlement were significant, the most valuable outcome was the complete discrediting of their planned narrative. Instead of entering her new life as a sympathetic figure who had escaped a controlling relationship, Melissa emerged as someone who had conspired to abuse the legal system through fabricated claims, a reputation that would follow her professionally and personally for years to come. The final legal documentation told a clear story that no amount of subsequent reputation management could fully erase. A calculated betrayal not just of marital vows, but of the fundamental principles of honesty and integrity upon which both relationships and legal systems depend. The courts had not merely divided assets. They had rendered judgment on character and conduct in the most public and permanent manner possible. In the immediate aftermath of the divorce settlement, I faced the complex task of rebuilding a life that had been fundamentally altered by betrayal. The legal victory, while comprehensive, couldn't erase 15 years of shared history or the psychological impact of such profound deception. The process of recovery would prove as methodical and intentional as the strategic response to the betrayal itself. My first decision was to sell the Lexington house despite having been awarded full ownership. Despite its objective beauty and financial value, the home had become psychologically uninhabitable. Every room echoed with memories now tainted by the knowledge of Melissa's duplicity. Each space held moments I now questioned. Had she been messaging James from the kitchen island while I prepared dinner? Had she been planning my destruction while we watched movies in the living room? The cognitive dissonance between my past perception and present knowledge made continued residence untenable. The real estate market was experiencing an unprecedented seller's boom, with Boston area properties often receiving multiple offers above asking price within days of listing. Our home, with its historic charm, modern renovations, and desirable location, sold within a week for $127,000 above the asking price. This financial windfall, combined with my favorable divorce settlement, provided the resources for a complete geographical and professional reset. After extensive research and several exploratory visits, I decided on Seattle as my new home base. The thriving tech industry offered abundant professional opportunities, while the city's geography, culture, and distance from Boston promised the fresh start I needed. Through a former colleague now working at a major Seattle-based financial technology firm, I secured a position as Director of Security Architecture, a significant promotion from my previous role that reflected both my technical expertise and the leadership skills I had demonstrated throughout my career. The transition wasn't without challenges. Relocating across the country meant leaving behind the support network I had cultivated over decades. The familiar rhythms of Boston, the historical landmarks I passed daily, the neighborhood coffee shop where the baristas knew my order, the seasonal changes that had structured my years, were replaced by unfamiliar territory requiring conscious navigation. Simple tasks like finding a reliable mechanic or knowing which grocery store carried my preferred products became minor adventures in adaptation. Professional immersion provided initial structure during this transition period. I threw myself into learning the new organization's systems, culture, and challenges. My colleagues were welcoming, impressed by my credentials, and unaware of the personal upheaval that had preceded my arrival. This professional tabula rasa was refreshing, being evaluated solely on current contributions rather than through the lens of past associations or circumstances. Housing represented another intentional break from the past. Rather than immediately purchasing another home, I leased a modern apartment in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood, a vibrant urban environment drastically different from suburban Lexington. The contemporary glass and steel building, minimalist furnishings, and walkable neighborhood filled with eclectic dining options and independent bookstores created a daily experience that shared no sensory connections with my previous life. The psychological recovery process required more deliberate intervention. I engaged a therapist specializing in betrayal trauma, Dr. Elena Whitman, who helped me process not just the infidelity, but the deeper violation of having been targeted for systematic manipulation and destruction by someone I had trusted completely. These weekly sessions provided crucial space to examine the hypervigilance and trust issues that naturally emerged from such experience. What you're describing is similar to what we see in victims of long-term covert psychological abuse, DR. Whitman explained during an early session. The disorientation comes not just from the betrayal itself, but from the fundamental questioning of your own reality, wondering how you could have misread someone and something so profoundly for so long. Through these therapeutic conversations, I gradually developed a more nuanced understanding of what had occurred. Melissa's betrayal reflected her own character deficiencies rather than any inadequacy in me or our relationship. The elaborate deception required to maintain her double life spoke to her moral compromises, not my obliviousness. Most importantly, I learned to separate healthy trust from blind trust, understanding that reasonable verification doesn't contradict loving commitment. Physical wellness became another cornerstone of my recovery. Seattle's natural environment offered abundant opportunities for outdoor activities that had never been part of my Boston routine. I began hiking the numerous trails surrounding the city, gradually building endurance and technical skill until I could tackle challenging routes. In the Cascade Mountains, the physical exertion, connection with nature, and measurable progress in abilities provided therapeutic benefits that complemented the psychological work done on the recommendation of a colleague. I also began training at a local boxing gym 3 mornings weekly. The discipline required for proper technique, the physical release of controlled aggression, and the meditative focus necessary during training sessions proved remarkably effective for processing lingering anger. My trainer, a former professional boxer named Marcus who had rebuilt his life after his own personal setbacks, became both a fitness coach and informal life philosopher. Power comes from proper rotation, not just arm strength, he would instruct while holding the focus mitts. Same in life. Your strength comes from a solid foundation and proper alignment, not just pushing harder at the problem. Social reconstruction presented perhaps the greatest challenge. After experiencing such calculated betrayal, I approached new relationships with instinctive caution. Rather than forcing immediate, deep connections, I focused on building a diverse network of activity-based acquaintances, hiking groups, professional organizations, a monthly book club hosted at a local independent bookstore. These context-specific relationships allowed me to practice social engagement without the vulnerability of more intimate connections. Approximately 8 months after relocating, I received an unexpected email from Catherine Harrington. She had accepted a prestigious position at Seattle Children's Hospital and would be relocating to the area within the month. She suggested meeting for coffee once she was settled, noting that despite the painful circumstances of our connection, she had appreciated my honesty and conduct throughout the ordeal. Our initial meeting was understandably awkward. We were essentially strangers connected only by our respective betrayals. However, we discovered unexpected common ground beyond our shared experience. Catherine was also rebuilding her life intentionally, making deliberate choices about her professional direction, social connections, and personal development. We found ourselves comparing notes on the challenges of starting over in middle age, navigating new social landscapes, and processing experiences that friends without similar histories couldn't fully comprehend. The strangest part, Catherine observed during our second meeting, is that I'm actually happier now. Not despite what happened, but partly because of it. Being forced to rebuild makes you very intentional about what you're building. I recognize that same phenomenon in my own experience. The necessity of consciously designing a new life had eliminated the autopilot mode that often characterizes midlife. Every aspect of my current situation, from my apartment's location to my weekend activities to my career direction, represented a deliberate choice rather than inertial continuation. Catherine and I continued meeting occasionally as friendly acquaintances navigating parallel journeys. These conversations remained platonic, focused on mutual support and understanding rather than romantic potential. Both of us recognized that we needed to complete our individual healing before considering new relationships. By the second anniversary of my discovery of Melissa's betrayal, my new life had solidified into something authentic and satisfying. Professional success came in the form of a significant promotion to Vice President of Information Security, responsible for protecting the financial data of millions of customers worldwide. My hiking exploits had expanded to include mountaineering, with successful summits of Mount Rainier and Mount Baker. My social circle had expanded to include genuine friendships with colleagues, fellow outdoor enthusiasts, and members of the classic motorcycle restoration group I had joined on impulse. Throughout this period, I maintained minimal knowledge of Melissa's circumstances, intentionally avoiding the temptation to track her situation through mutual connections. The information that occasionally reached me through unavoidable channels painted a picture of continued struggle. After her termination from Anderson and Mitchell, she had difficulty securing comparable employment, her professional reputation tarnished by both the ethical violations and the subsequent legal proceedings. She eventually relocated to Chicago for a position significantly below her previous career level. James Harrington experienced even more dramatic professional consequences. His behavior violated not just social norms, but specific corporate policies regarding supervisor-subordinate relationships and created significant legal exposure for the firm. The company's internal investigation expanded beyond his relationship with Melissa to examine his broader pattern of behavior with female employees, ultimately revealing several previous inappropriate situations that had been quietly resolved without formal documentation. His termination for cause was accompanied by permanent removal from all professional organizations in which he had held leadership positions. That Catherine's divorce settlement was similarly comprehensive, awarded primary custody of their children, and substantial financial compensation that reflected both James's misconduct and his significantly higher earning capacity. The continued child support and college expense obligations ensured that James's financial recovery would be further complicated for years to come. The relationship between Melissa and James did not survive the cascade of consequences they had triggered. According to mutual friends who occasionally updated me despite my lack of direct inquiry, they had attempted to maintain their relationship during the initial professional and legal challenges, but ultimately separated under the combined pressure of financial strain, reputation damage, and mutual recrimination. Their dream of building a new life together had crumbled under the weight of the destruction they had brought upon themselves. That I take no pleasure in their continued struggles, but I recognize the natural consequences of their actions. The machinery they had set in motion to destroy my life ultimately destroyed their own, not through my vindictiveness, but through the exposure of their character and conduct to professional and social evaluation. My own path forward continues to evolve. Recently, I've begun cautiously exploring the possibility of romantic connection again, accepting a dinner invitation from Lauren, an environmental attorney I met through the mountaineering club. Our first date was characterized by honesty about our respective histories and measured optimism about future possibilities. Whether this particular relationship develops further remains to be seen, but the ability to consider such possibilities represents significant healing from the emotional devastation of 2 years ago. Professionally, I've expanded my influence beyond my direct corporate responsibilities, publishing articles on cybersecurity ethics and speaking at industry conferences about security architecture. These contributions have established me as a thought leader in my field while creating professional satisfaction that transcends title or compensation. My relationship with Seattle has deepened from initial appreciation to genuine attachment. The city's combination of urban amenities and natural beauty provides daily reminders of the positive choice I made in relocating here. I recently purchased a hillside property with panoramic views of Puget Sound, my first real estate acquisition since selling the Lexington house. and am working with an architect to design a home that reflects my current values and lifestyle rather than attempting to recreate any aspect of my previous life. The most significant marker of my recovery is the shift in how I conceptualize my experience. What happened remains objectively terrible, a profound betrayal by someone I had trusted completely. However, I no longer view myself primarily as a victim of that betrayal. Instead, I recognize myself as someone who faced extraordinary challenge with dignity, strategic thinking, and ultimately resilience. The experience revealed strengths I hadn't known I possessed and catalyzed growth I might never have otherwise experienced. The revenge elements of my response to the betrayal, the systematic dismantling of their professional and social standing, were necessary and justified components of protecting myself from their planned destruction of my life. However, the true victory wasn't in their downfall, but in my subsequent rebuilding. They spent months methodically planning to destroy what I had. Spent 15 years building. I spent months ensuring that they wouldn't succeed, then years building something better than what I had before. If there's wisdom I've gained from this experience, it's that justice and vengeance are distinct concepts. Justice involves ensuring that intentional harm doesn't achieve its intended outcome, that deception doesn't profit, that manipulation doesn't succeed. Vengeance involves wanting others to suffer for the sake of suffering. My focus remained consistently on the former while avoiding the latter, on ensuring accountability rather than inflicting punishment. The ultimate irony is that Melissa and James viewed me as predictable, easily manipulated, and incapable of strategic thinking. In their arrogance, they created elaborate plans based on a fundamentally flawed assessment of their opponent. They mistook my trustfulness for naivety, my commitment for complacency, my patience for passivity. Their catastrophic miscalculation speaks to the danger of underestimating someone based on assumptions rather than observation. Today, as I watch the sunset from my apartment balcony overlooking Elliott Bay, I feel neither triumph nor bitterness about the past. Instead, I experience profound gratitude for the present, for the life I've consciously created from the ashes of betrayal, for the strength I discovered through adversity, and for the authentic connections I've formed on the other side of loss. The betrayal irrevocably changed me, but the direction of that change was ultimately my choice. I choose to be defined not by what was done to me, but by how I responded and who I became as a result. What Melissa and James never understood was that attempting to destroy someone doesn't necessarily destroy them. Sometimes it simply reveals who they truly are. In trying to break me, they ultimately revealed the strength they never knew I had. That if you found this story compelling, please subscribe to our channel for more real-life accounts of betrayal and its consequences. Remember, these stories are shared not to promote vengeance, but to illustrate the human capacity for resilience in the face of profound betrayal. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting better.